Right. My point, I've made this more of a broad point, because I saw after the America's RMR, someone ran those stats where they showed, and this is actually quite shocking to me, bro. I'm the historian, but I forgot this aspect. Did you see that? Because Complexity qualified, bro, EliGe has like way more major qualifications than anyone else in NA. Did you see that? He had something 14 or something mental. And then I'm not joking, like second was like 8 or something, or like a nat 10 or something, like NAF or something. And by the way, because it's NAF, if they're in like the same era and they both keep qualifying, he's never going to catch up. Like basically, EliGe is way ahead in terms of major qualifications. And then also, so what I thought I would make the good point is, I thought this is another good point to sort of just touch on the fact that like in CS2, EliGe has completely reverted the trajectory of his career. If you remember at the end of CS2, most people would have said this is the sort of team he should be on, but more from the negative, sort of like that's where you deserve to be, EliGe. You know, like maybe you can, like, you know, basically like go and battle like with Grim and Floppy and see if you can be the best in their team. Whereas instead, I think everyone agrees, including it looks like EliGe, he's mega overqualified for call the entire time CS2's been out. Like he actually's unironically been, for me, almost a top 10 player like every month of CS2. And if you're watching this team, it's also one of those players where, look, you could argue the other direction too. Maybe he calls his own a number a lot. Maybe he's selfish. Who knows? But I tell you what, everything in this team fucking runs through this guy. Like, they just live and die on his back when he has an AK on T-side. Like, it's ridiculous. But he is mega. Like, he's actually showed in CS2. Like, it's one of the rare times I've ever seen a player go almost all the way down and then all the way back up again. So, like, the point that, like, you could argue he's as good as in his peak at this point in time. So, I was just thinking about it because I was thinking, right, you consider how many other names there are. You have people like, obviously, fucking Stewie 2K lost his head for a while. He's not even on the team right now, out of the game for ages. You have Tarek just is off in Valorant. You have all these great NA names, and most of them, like Stanislaw came back again, most of them never really get to be at the top. You don't really, in general, one of the saddest things I think about CS is you don't get that true class of like Hall of Famers in NA that we got in Europe. Think of like how many generations you can go through. You can go through the first generation of Scream and those guys, then you can go to the ones with, you know, like Olaf Meister and Big Guardian and stuff, then you can go to the latter. In NA, you have like a couple of bunches, and most of them just aren't even here anymore. So to me, it's actually a big deal to have like one of the legendary players still really good at the game and still around. Like he's still playing in an NA team even. Although, by the way, we'll see how long that lasts. But, you know, he is technically now still playing in an NA team. What do you guys think of this?
I have a bunch of things that are going to sound like they're not really compliments at all, but like I want to
go on.
Like, I think what's so exciting for me about EliGe as well is this idea that he really was like the king of Liquid. Like, I don't know how many years he was on Liquid, but it seemed like he was essentially forever, right?
Yes.
And he, you know, for anyone that knows anything about how that team worked, like he really was the kingmaker on that team. Like if someone needed to go out of the team, it was always going to be EliGe called to say, you're out, you know? But the problem is when you run through enough good players, eventually the finger's going to be pointed at you. People are going to say, well, you had all this material to work with. You guys are still not winning like the big tournaments. We need, like, unfortunately now it's your turn. Like, you know, everyone's going to turn around and point at you. And I'm going to be honest, when that happened, and I think the writing was sort of on the wall for a long time, maybe even longer than I actually expected. When it finally happened, I thought, there's no way he's going to come back and play like really good Counter-Strike. Because like, imagine what a massive hit that is to your ego. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying, like, if you're someone who is playing the kind of Counter-Strike that EliGe does, like, you almost have to be, like, a super ego person. Like, you have to believe that every time you step in the server, you're going to crush everyone in front of you. So, like, unfortunately, you probably can't turn that off too much. And, like, obviously, I think Liquid even made, like, a little mini documentary kind of thing where they sort of talked about, you know, him having, you know, maybe sort of a fragile mindset that, like, you know, it was like there was a little bit of everything. Like, he was a super strong weapon, but also there was the other side of him where he could be very critical towards his teammates and all the rest of it. And I think, so in a way, like, if finally, like, you're out of options and now you're kicked from the team or you're removed from the team or whatever, and now you're joining Complexity and it's like, you have to rebuild, and you're doing it with Grim, who was on your team, and somebody who, you know, like, it's the whole dynamic is set up for you to feel like, that's it, like, it's over for me. And then he comes back and still plays amazing Counter-Strike. Like, it's actually so sick in a way, because it is, in a way, you could say, well, it's one thing to play with, like, all the best NA people on Liquid. You have, like, insane resources. Like, not to discount what they did, but it's just, like, you could have made that argument to say, well, you know, yeah, but he was on Liquid with all the best players, and now he's still doing it. Like, it is kind of sick. Like, he's building, actually, a really sick story for himself, I think, in a weird way.
I mean, for EliGe on this comeback, it's been the driving force for why Complexity even has the floor that they do. If it weren't for, like, because everybody else's form has been wavering on Complexity, and he's I don't know if I want to say single-handedly, but I feel like I have to. Like he's
Sometimes it feels
single-handedly,
like it, doesn't it? Come on.
yeah, he's single-handedly keeping them in relevancy, despite the fact that, yeah, I think Grim has actually had a little bit of a resurgence as a player. I think Floppy actually looked pretty good at parts of this RMR, but there's other tournaments where they completely fall off. So I feel like if it weren't for EliGe, like, man, like, I almost think Jason Lake just needs to, regardless of what happens with EliGe, and if he goes to another team or if he, goes to Europe, what have you, I think Jason Lake needs to make a public thank you letter for what EliGe has done to uphold like Complexity's status as an organization.
That does make Cole. The only thing is though, Maui, that makes Cole sound kind of bummy. That for like 1 year in the org, you want to like build one of those Michael Jordan statues outside like the Cole headquarters or whatever. Like that does make you look a bit shit as an org. I don't know. Oh, by the way, I also noticed from what Anders was saying, he is correct there. You notice Anders did a meta-analysis of what happens when you have like Game of Thrones type environments. Well, I will say, Anders, you will know this because we were all there at Flashpoint 2. It's like what happened to Maui Snake when he used to play Among Us with us. Because remember, Maui got too addicted to that game of trying to marinate people all the time and always be the ultimate imposter. But what it meant was, by the end, even when he's not the imposter and he's telling the truth and doing the tasks, everyone just assumed he's the imposter and just kept fucking kicking him or saying he was lying. So I agree. The problem is, Anders, that game, it can't work long run. Eventually, he's right. Eventually, they realise it's just you kicking everyone and pulling all the strings. So, by the way, unironically, that is sort of what happened to him in Liquid, by the way, guys. What really happened is, it's actually one of the rare times where it is what it looks like from the outside. From the outside, it was EliGe's team the whole time because he was the shit and he was the man, and it worked. That's the crucial thing. I've always said this to Simple. You can, by the way, if you tell people basically, give me the resources and I'll carry, but you then carry, that's just responsible at that point in time. You're not even being a dick, bro. You're actually helping your teammates. You win the game. But the problem becomes, as I always told Simple, mate, if you ever don't carry those games, though, mate, you better change that fucking attitude because that doesn't work. That equation doesn't resolve anymore. So the problem EliGe had was when his level went down, and especially when Liquid just wasn't as good at like, playing the modern style, they unironically did, like, internally in the org, it became Yikindar's team for real. Like, when Yikindar joined, he was so dope at the game, he was bringing the new meta. That really is sort of how it went. So that is kind of how we got kicked out. And by the way, I totally agree with you, Anders. You could even say, bearing in mind, actually, EliGe literally did have one of those Shocks-esque reputations of like he's the princess and everything has to be his way. I actually think you could argue a lot of people would have said he's going to be done then if he goes to a smaller team. Like if you go to a smaller team where they don't have all those great players like you said, by the way, players like that usually get even more angry when like a lesser teammate fucks up. I'm actually fairly impressed that, like, look, I do get the sense he's still pretty intense, but I think he actually holds it in even fairly reasonably. I've never seen him do some simple shit where you're like fucking shooting shots at people in interviews and stuff. Like he maybe look, he has one of the worst reaction cam ones. He definitely does that one where he reacts every time, but it's like he does fucking keep it down though. He doesn't let it overflow. It feels like
it's also like to some extent, right? You can't. It's hard to have one with the other. Like it makes sense why some of these players that are like you said, really intense, right? Like the kind of you get one side of it, which like you're like a Nico or like an EliGe, someone you're like really really skilled, but then and that also means it's hard for the rest of the team to criticize you, right? Who's going to step up and say, hey, bro, calm down. Like, we're also just trying to have a good time.
And there's actually a story for real where I asked Simple in my reflections with him. Because there's like a video or whatever where Alexi B said something to him when they first made that Na'Vi team where it was the international lineup. Like, Alexi B said to Simple something like, you're always flaming us, but can we actually flame you? And Simple, I actually asked Simple this question, like, well, can they? Can they just turn on to you? And he said, sadly, the way he even said it was so iconic, Anders, he just went, they can try. Which is like, what? But it's not what you're saying. It's so true, yeah.
Yeah.
But there is something, like, obviously from like a regular like social contract point of view, like we all don't like it when people are arrogant and like full of ego. But in some sense, in a competition, like if you earn that level, like I think you should be allowed. You should be allowed to really have like a super arrogant attitude and say like, I am just the best, and this team doesn't exist without me. And all that. Like it might be unpleasant if they were your friend and they were in the room next to you, and you'd be like, oh, this is making the situation. But they're not. They're in a competition trying to win. So I have a huge tolerance for like people who are like super aggressive and even somewhat arrogant and filled with ego when it comes to these things, because in a way, that's also what makes them like super incredible competitors, right? Like I think the idea of saying we want to take these people and remove that part and still have them be as good, you probably can't do that.
No, I'll give you two quick angles. One, it's like when people say about like on-camera person, like, oh, it'd be great to have a beer with. It's like, Joe, the role I play isn't supposed to be the guy you like and would have a beer with. I'm there to be the annoying guy who says the shit you don't like, but that makes it spikes. Already, that doesn't make sense as an application. You'd basically be getting the guy you wouldn't want to see on camera, but you'd want to have a beer with. And then also, on that point of like the players, the reason why it literally makes sense, Anders, is one of the things that is actually, I've always found this so incredible about the best players ever. Even when I used to stand like at an event behind Forest or something, is it's not a joke. When he does like the most insane 3K you've ever done in your life, he doesn't even flinch. It looks like his heart rate doesn't even go, because in his brain, he has the arrogance to go, I need to get this last kill to close the round though. Like that way of thinking, normal humans, the rest of us are just mortals in that sense. So in a way, you have to be insanely egotistical. Think about some of the rounds you've seen where like Simple just like re-peaks on the 1v1 to no-scope someone in their head. It's like, normal players don't do it. That's actually an inadvisable play, guys. But if you're Simple, not only does he do it, but we fucking love that he does it. We want him to do that. I've told people this story back in the day. I used to actually not like EliGe because he was everything I don't like. He was just like some quiet, moody, brooding little guy who was like super nerdy. At the time, he wasn't even that good, if you remember. He was just like an above-average player who hadn't yet blossomed. And I'd heard all this stuff like, because I was friends with Hiko. I'd heard like, he's a bit pissy in the team, a bit. But then I told everyone this story before. The moment that turned me, because listen, this plays right into everything I love about narrative building. It's some anime. This is some like shonen anime shit. It's the story that I was told by a bunch of them where they had this discussion after the ESL Cologne Major where they made that final. And the discussion basically was, look, we obviously don't have Simple under contract. If we want to sign him, we've got to do it now because Navi's going to sign him. So if we sign him, we're going to have to give him a giant contract basically. So let's all take like a poll now. Do we try? Like, do we go for it? Do we go for the Simple move? And famously, right, it was like sort of like, it was like some American exit. It was like tied at the very end. It was like, oh, this person says I don't mind. This person says I want to. The other one says, I'll go along with whatever anyone says. And then the last vote for real, like came down to like EliGe is the story I was told, right? And when it came down to him, I can't remember if someone says he actually said this line, because this sounds too much like out of a movie, or if they just meant this is the gist of what he said. But basically, someone like Hiko said something like, I did sort of say in the meeting, like, but the guy just mega carried us. Like, who's going to carry us if not him? And supposedly, EliGe said, me. Now, when I heard that story, Anders, that's just what the doctor ordered, mate. Yeah. I love that. Especially because then, by the way, literally, he not only said that, but I'm not even joking. That's almost like the moment where if you ever go and see him just look on Hitchell, that's like the moment his career just goes like this, like the spike upwards. Like, he actually did it as well. He actually, remember, he actually won like a Grand Slam without Simple there. They were like that close to a major, an era. Like, that sort of story, I agree with you. I always say the level of arrogance and bad attitude, that's just tempered by how good you are. If you're really good, by the way, I'll give you mad room. I'll give you like crazy stakes that you can go. Like the real problem people like Boris had was just they're not actually Nico. Like if you were, by the way, you could have been changing mouse every fucking day, mate. We wouldn't give a fuck. Like if you're that cracked out, it's all good. No, I'm with you. Yeah. I do like the way this was actually the good point, but half it was just like, anyway, egotistical star.
Yeah.
I know. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.